Hi there, Year 12. So in the last lesson, we finished off having a look at what the CDE was. Okay, remember, it's just a location where all of the data for a project is saved. Everyone can access it, everyone can work on their own bit, but we're not looking at necessarily everyone working on the same documents. It's just where everything is stored. Okay, so hopefully you've gone through and you understand what the CDE is. If you start this lesson and you think, no, didn't quite get it, go back, watch the video again, send me a message to make sure that you do understand, because you're going to be getting an assignment in tomorrow's lesson that is going to be about this. So you need to understand it. Okay, so today we're going to have a little bit of a deeper look at the Common Data Environment, a little bit more about how it works, who uses it, how it's used, and hopefully by the end of it, when I show you the criteria for your assignment, you should feel quite confident that when it comes out on Thursday, you will be able to ace it. So once you have got your CDE set up, there's a certain way to structure and to use it. So within the folders, you typically will have files, or you'll have subdirectories, so a series of folders where you find that information, and they can be either structured or unstructured, and these files, these folders, are known as information containers. Okay, a structured information container has items such as the geometric model, so the actual Revit. It might have schedules, databases, Word document, that kind of thing. Or it could have unstructured information containers, so things like application forms, video clips, sound recordings, stuff that actually it's just there to help you get an idea of how to then work on the structured information containers. Okay, those information containers move between different states as the work progresses. So when they start, they're known as work in progress. Okay, everyone will know that if they're looking at those within the CDE, they are work in progress, they are not finished. They might be shared for a bit of collaboration at the start, but they're not the end product. You then have final decisions and documents and models that are published, and they are clearly defined in the CDE. So you should know when you're looking at a document within that common data environment if something is a work in progress or if it is the final decision. There might still be some minor changes to that final decision, depending if things change, but you should know that if you go to a final decision document or model or folder, that it isn't likely to have changed since you last looked at it. And then eventually, when that project is finished and it's not being used anymore, or there's no more changes that are going to be required, that information container may still be archived. That means you've still got access to it, you can still have a look at it, but the content has been archived, it's been put away, it's not being changed, it's not being worked on anymore. Okay, just so that you're aware, if you were to go into a CDE in the future, you would hope that it was nicely organized and you'd be able to see, right, these are the things that are the work in progress still, these are the things that are being used at the moment but are final decisions. That folder over there is archived, it's not being used anymore, I can refer back to it, but I shouldn't be making changes or, necessarily basing ideas off that. Okay, so we're going to have a look now at something called composite information and federated information. Okay, so within a CDE, you will either have composite information, federated information, or potentially you might have a mix of the two within that document. If we start off, and we've got this side of the table being the composite information, this side being the federated. If we start on this side, composite information, it's the typical format of information that you have for level 2 BIM. So if we flip back a few slides, okay, when we get there, my computer's a little slow, I do apologise. So if we have a look back here, remember BIM level 2, okay, we're looking at separate files, separate libraries, everyone can just see the different documents that are being worked on. Okay, that's your idea for composite information. Okay, it's a folder, it's your common data environment that is made up of documents and models and spreadsheets and all individual files that are not interacting with each other. There will be common information between them, but they're not interacting with each other. They're not, if you make a change in one, it's not influencing something else in any way automatically. Okay, they are all separate to each other. There's no interaction going on. Okay, that CDE level 2, the composite information, that is looked after by the information manager who has been appointed by the client. Okay, and all of the regulations, the BIM protocol, all that kind of thing that we've looked at says that the client should be appointing an information manager to oversee that CDE between all the different groups. Okay, Your federated information then, this is a possible format for level 3. Some places that you see this information, they'll say, well, it's not really full level 3, but it's probably the version of level 3 that most places are capable of doing now. So it's the creation of a single model, which might be based on or might use individual data as a starting point, but it's the creation of one model which is then collaboratively worked on by multiple people, it should say there. Sorry, I've obviously forgot to finish my sentence. So it's one model, linked spreadsheet, linked Gantt chart, everything like that. And when someone makes a change on it, it's making changes elsewhere. Okay, now in terms of who looks after it, that would also be looked after by the information manager. But obviously, if you've sorry, if you've got various people working on one document, there's going to be copyright and there's going to be ownership complications. And we'll look into that a little bit more with what I want you to do. Okay, if you now, I'm going to jump off here so hopefully it pays attention to me. I've been referring you quite often to these notes down at the bottom. Okay, so you can see on the what is CDE slide, there's a set of notes. There's a link underneath. You can see that there's 2 links underneath here. And then you can see on the composite information and federated information, again, there's a couple of links there. Okay, what I'm asking you to do, although I'm going to talk through it, this is going to be quite a talk heavy video, so I do apologise for that. You're going to be listening to me for quite a while, sorry. I'm going to just have a quick flick over some of the pages that I found some really, really useful resources for you, and actually I'm going to do a quick read over them so you know which bits to look out for, and then I want you to do the advantages and the disadvantages of each into this section here. Okay, so if we just have a look at a few of the ones on here. So we've got our Designing Buildings wiki here. Okay, and if I scroll up, it starts talking about the idea that the government wants to have fully collaborative 3D BIM moving forward. It talks about what the level 2 BIM was. Hopefully you can't hear Isla from downstairs at the moment. Here it talks about the fact that at level 2 you've got this 3D information with data attached to it but in separate models. That's what they're talking about for composite information. Okay, it then talks here about federation and explains a little bit about what federation is. It talks about what a federated model here, and then it talks about the fact that it's really useful if you're trying to coordinate your design and if you're trying to avoid clashes. Okay, if everyone's working on the same model, if everyone's working on the same information, then you're going to be able to see issues as they happen. You've got more sets of eyes looking at the same model as you are making changes. So that's really useful and that should help. Okay, what it does talk about as well on here, which is useful, is it talks about this information manager's role, which is important for you to have an understanding of. And then it talks about here some of the ways of managing, which we're going to go on to. Okay. It's just useful for you to have a read over that, and in there's some of those benefits and advantages and disadvantages that I need for you to have in that table. Don't need that one yet. Oh, I think I closed some of the ones I needed you to have. That's helpful, isn't it? Okay, just give it a minute for that to open for me. Apologies. Those of you that are sat there now while my laptop takes forever to do something simple. There we go. Okay, we've then got this site here, and you'll see there's a couple of tabs open at the top that are from this site. There's really, really useful information on this site about BIM. Okay, and if we look down, it talks about how this federated model would be being used. It talks about how it's managed. It talks about implications, okay, contractual implications. Remember when we were talking the other day about the BIM protocol? One of the important things about the BIM protocol is it sets out who's responsible for that, for what, and it talks about the intellectual property rights. The difficult thing if you're using a federated model is that you start to be working on other people's projects. You start to be changing other people's work. So in terms of contracts and in terms of liability, in terms of making sure you're not taking and altering someone else's work, it does start to get quite complicated. So that's something that you need to have a look at that bit on that page, definitely for that. But then it talks about the benefits of it. So earlier design coordination and development, making sure that you're avoiding those clashes, and also improved estimations, because everything is because it's a one model that you're working on, you should have linked your costings and your Gantt chart software to it as well. So hopefully if you're using this federated model, you know, the quantity surveyor and the project manager's got a really good idea of what the situation is going to be for them based on those design decisions that are being made. Okay, so on those sheets there's a few things for you to have a look at. It's talking about what the task that I want you to do is think about what's going to be your advantages and your disadvantages of having a composite information and having federated information for a BIM enabled project. Okay, you can see from the title it's asking you about the CDE and the RIBA depow together, which I will come on to a little bit more when we talk about the assignment. Have a look back at those stages. Have a look back at how many people are involved, how many different stages there are, because actually there's definite advantages at certain points for having composite information or having federated information. There's definite disadvantages, so you don't need to put them in full sentences, just bullet point them for the task would be ideal. And obviously I'll have a look through your notes when we get to it. Okay, so the last bit that you need to know before we get onto the assignment is about managing the CDE. So if we just quickly jump to this page here where it's talking about it, it wants you to know measures required to ensure that a construction project CDE is up to date and that the content is suitable and accurate. Okay, so if we go down to here, there's all different ways of managing the CDE, and same as before, I've put a bunch of links underneath that I'm going to want you to go and have a look at. Okay, so in terms of managing the CDE, we've already spoken about the fact that the client has to appoint an information manager. They have to make a decision at the start who is going to be responsible for managing that information. And it could be, like I was saying as an example earlier, cloud-based storage is becoming a massive facilitator of BIM and these cohesive, collaborative projects. So it could be that you've got someone who sets up the cloud-based storage and is responsible for going on, checking it, making sure the files are being worked on, making sure that there's no mistakes going on, checking that people aren't taking files from it, that kind of thing. So you've got an information manager. A really good way to make sure that your CDE is easy to access and easy to understand is to have something called an information container breakdown structure. So remember I was saying before that your information container is where all of these files are stored. Just having something as simple as a breakdown, kind of like your flowchart that you've just done for the assignment, but showing that, right, you've got heading, let's say you've got folder A, B, C and D. Well, if you were to go into A, you're going to find 1, 2, 3 and 4. If you were to go into B, you're going to find 5 and 6. If you were to go into C, you're going to find 7, 8, and then because it's relevant to it, you might find document 10. So having that structure that you can look at so that anyone new who comes into that CDE, they know where they're going to find what they need. Okay, you can have a federation strategy. So obviously this is if you've got this federated information instead of the composite information. As we were saying, there's a lot of difficulties in terms of copyright, in terms of ownership, in terms of use, if you're working on just one single project, one single document. So if alongside your BIM protocols, you're going to need some kind of federation strategy, and that could come from the help that you might get from the BIM execution plan and from the BIM protocol. So as I said, I've got a bunch of links for you underneath, which we've got up here. Okay, so those were the ones we were looking at before. So I've got a bit here about what the BIM execution plan is. Talks a bit more about what BIM is. It just helps to remind you, sorry. And then it talks here about pre-contract, what you can do in terms of executing BIM, so putting in things about employers' information requirements, talking about what the employer wants to get from it, and therefore you can think about how you can actually use that information. What information are you going to need? How is it going to be best to manage it? Is composite going to work better? Is federated going to work better? You can make that decision at the start. Or once those contracts have come in, you can have your BIM execution plan slightly different, and that's about how the information required by those requirements will be provided. So you've got things like what management information are you going to have, what planning and documentation will you have, what methods are you going to have for doing things, what IT solutions are you going to have for if something goes wrong. Okay, so if you are if you're working towards having BIM as part of your process, the BIM execution plan could help. What it says down here is the RIBA planner work suggests that the digital execution plan is an evolution of the BIM execution plan. So actually I'll just pop that on there, I missed that before, but you've also got a digital execution plan that you could have a look at. Okay, let's add that onto the slide while we're here. Okay, so you've got something else on there that, you know, or what all of these are offering people is a set of guidelines and advice on how to make sure that these processes are working, how to make sure it is actually collaborative and it is actually helpful and it is actually getting a good endpoint. I've given you another bit of information here about the BIM protocol. Okay, so you can have another read through that and you can pull out to do with your different types of information to pull out your CDC. It talks about the fact that the protocol is a contractual document, so the aim of it is to try and make sure there aren't issues, to try and make sure that everyone understands what they're doing and to make it as seamless as possible. It talks about copyright and licensing in terms of the client in how they can use their information. That's going to be more important when we go on to the next task, but certainly when you're talking about composite versus federated, these things coming in and helping you in terms of copyright and licensing and who owns what are definitely important in terms of how to help in the facilitation of using these. I think that was it in terms of the links that I wanted you to do. So I could do with you just jotting down some notes to do with that. And if we just now quickly have a look here. So this is the level that you should be able to do this workout. Obviously this isn't your assignment, but this is what your assignment is going to be marked on when my slide figures out what it's doing. Technology letting me down. Let's give that another go. So we've got two pass criteria, we've got a merit criteria, and we've got a distinction criteria when they decide to load. This would do that, wouldn't it? Okay, let's do it from here instead. So you've got your two pass criteria. Okay, describe the application of the RIBA DIPAL stages in a BIM enabled design and construct project. So all it's saying is that if you're trying to use BIM, if you're trying to work collaboratively, how would you be using the digital plan of work to be helping you to do that? And then it says describe how the CDE supports a BIM enabled design and construct project. So how is using a common data environment going to support those projects? You've got analyze the application of those two things in your BIM enabled design and construct project. So that's going to be talking about how are they used, why are they used, what would you be doing if you were using those, and then that leads really nicely into your distinction of evaluate the two. What are the positives, what are the negatives? You can break your CDE down into your composite and your federated. You can talk about the different expectations, the maturity levels of BIM. You can talk about the levels of detail and the people that are involved. So it should be a super easy assignment when I give it out to you tomorrow. Hopefully it's not going to cause anyone too many issues, and I guess the benefit of having done it your teaching like this is that obviously you can go back and listen to the videos if you need to and if you are struggling. So the main thing that I need you to do in terms of this double lesson for today is I need you to be listening to this video really closely and pulling out the advice and the tips that I'm saying. I need you to make some notes on the bits that I've asked you for, and I need you to go onto those links at the bottom of these two slides and just add anything else that you think is going to be important. Ideally, so that when I give you these criteria in this assignment, you don't have to go back through all of those pages again when it comes to writing your assignment. As always, if you've got any questions, rewatch the video and then contact me if you're still stuck. I can do voice calls. I will be available tomorrow to do voice calls if people want to. Sorry, today when you're watching this. To do voice calls if people need to. because obviously I could do with you looking back over all of the other stuff from these lessons as well, just to make sure that you're happy in preparation for the assignment. Okay, thank you very much.